Hi, welcome back to Joe Blogs. In today's episode, we're going to talk about the secret World War I, the global conflict that took place between 1756 and 1763 that involved fighting on three different continents that quite legitimately should be called World War I. But it wasn't called World War I, it was called the 7 Years' War. Now, the reason that I'm making a special introduction for today's video is that this video forms part of a new experiment that I'm running on the channel. I've been looking for ways to develop the channel and to create more content. And I think delving into the history books is a really interesting thing to do. And if you're a long-standing fan of the channel, you'll know that in 2022, I tried an experiment whereby I was trying to get more people to become creators on YouTube. I set up a second channel and asked people to send me videos. Now, that experiment didn't really take off, and I think the reason for that was that we didn't have a defined category. The channel was all over the place. So what I'd like to do this time round is try to encourage people to make videos about interesting historic events. Now, the format is going to be exactly the same as the Joe Blogs format. So the whole video needs to be broken down into chapters and nicely structured with an intro and a summary at the end. So have a look at today's video to get a feel for the format. And if you think this is something you'd like to be involved in, then drop me an email at the email that's listed on my About page. So anyway, hopefully you've enjoyed seeing me again, the Joe Blog sign, one of the statues, and I really hope that you enjoy the video.
When people think of the First World War, most of the time their imaginations are brought to the global conflict that raged between 1914 and 1918. Yet, a conflict ranged almost 200 years before that across 5 continents, resulting in the loss of life for around 1.4 million people. This was the 7 Years' War, an epic struggle between the British and the Prussians on the one hand, and the French and the Spanish on the other. This war, I feel, is so interesting due to the fact that it is so often forgotten, despite having such a huge impact on global history, most notably being a direct cause of the American Wars for Independence. In today's video, we'll take a forensic look at the causes of the war, before taking a detailed look at the 3 major theatres of the war: the European theatre, the North American theatre, and the Asian theatre. At the end, we'll look at the impact of the war, before looking at the impact of the end of the war, and the Treaty of Paris. Hopefully, by the end of today's video, we'll be able to come to a judgment on the question of whether the 7 Years' War really was the First World War. Chapter 1. The Causes of the 7 Years' War. The 7 Years' War, spanning from 1756 to 1763, was a global conflict that involved major powers in Europe, North America, and Asia. The war's origins can be traced back to long-standing political, economic, and territorial tensions between the leading European powers, primarily Great Britain and France. In Europe, the 7 Years' War emerged as a culmination of several decades of power struggles between Great Britain and France. The Treaty of Aix-la-Chapelle in 1748 had temporarily ended the War of Austrian Succession, but left many unresolved issues. France sought to regain its lost territories, while Britain aimed to expand its colonial and commercial influence. Additionally, the diplomatic revolution of 1756 saw France and Austria forming an alliance, while Britain aligned with Prussia. This shift in alliances further heightened tensions on the continent. In the North American theatre, the competition for colonial dominance between Great Britain and France was a major catalyst for the war. The British colonies along the eastern seaboard of North America were expanding westward, encroaching upon French claims in the Ohio River Valley. The French, with a vast territory in Canada, sought to block British expansion to protect their fur trade interests and maintain a strategic presence in the region. Native American tribes also played a significant role in the conflict, as they had alliances with both of the European powers and also had their own interests in preserving their lands and autonomy. In Europe, the tensions between Britain and France, coupled with their respective alliances, resulted in several theatres of war. The conflict encompassed Central Europe, the Mediterranean, and the colonies in India and the West Indies. The battles were fought on land and at sea, with both sides vying for supremacy. While Britain had strong naval forces and a growing industrial base, France had a powerful army and formidable colonies. In India, the Anglo-French rivalry had been ongoing for decades, but the 7 Years' War only intensified the existing conflict. Both sides had East India companies competing for influence and control over lucrative trade routes and territories. In Asia, Britain's growing presence in Bengal and French ambitions in Southeast Asia led to tensions and clashes in the regions. The 7 Years' War also involved several European powers as secondary belligerents or allies. Spain, while initially neutral, later joined France against Britain, seeking to recover lost territories and bolster its colonial possessions. Portugal, although officially neutral, had close ties to Britain, leading to conflicts with Spain and France. Sweden and the Russian Empire also participated in the conflict at various stages, further entangling the war's complexities. As the 7 Years' Wars began, the world witnessed a tense international climate. The balance of power in Europe and colonial rivalries were at the forefront of global politics. The conflict's outbreak signified a dramatic collision of ambitions and interests, with both Britain and France boasting considerable military might and vast territorial holdings across the globe. The 7 Years' War, therefore, was a momentous conflict shaped by long-term rivalries, diplomatic manoeuvres and territorial disputes between major European powers. As the war erupted in various theatres across the globe, tensions escalated, and the ambitions of the belligerents came into sharp focus. The clash of empires, coupled with intricate alliances and regional complexities, set the stage for a protracted and devastating war that would reshape the geopolitical landscape of the 18th century. The mighty forces of Britain and France stood poised for the epic confrontation, as the world held its breath in anticipation of the momentous events about to unfold. Chapter 2. The European Theatre. The European theatre of the 7 Years' War saw a series of military campaigns and battles that unfolded between the 17th of May 1756 and the 15th of February 1763. The conflict involved major European powers, including Britain, France, Spain, Russia and Prussia, and it resulted in significant shifts in the role and the fortunes of these belligerents. The war began in 1756, when Britain and France formally declared hostilities. Initially, the French were successful in capturing the British island of Minorca in the Mediterranean. However, the tide soon turned in favour of Britain when William Pitt the Elder assumed office as Secretary of State for the Southern Department in 1757. Pitt's vigorous leadership and strategic planning rejuvenated Britain's war efforts and bolstered its military presence in Europe. In 1757, a notable battle took place in Germany, the Battle of Harstenbeck. The French, under Marshal d'Estrees, defeated the Hanoverian and British forces, leading to the Convention of Clodagh, which temporarily removed Hanover from the war. However, the Anglo-Hanoverian forces regrouped and launched a successful counterattack at the Battle of Minden in 1759, securing a significant victory. During the course of the war, Frederick the Great of Prussia played a crucial role, facing the combined forces of Austria, Russia and France. Frederick skillfully defended his territory in the Battle of Prague in 1757, and emerged victorious in the Battle of Rossbach in 1757, and the Battle of Leuthen in 1757 as well. His military prowess earned him international acclaim as a military genius. In Central Europe, the war continued with the Austrians launching an offensive against Prussia. However, Frederick the Great's military acumen once again prevailed, as he defeated the Austrians in the Battle of Kusendorf in 1759, albeit with heavy casualties on both sides. The situation in France worsened by 1760, as British forces launched an invasion from Portugal. This led to the successful capture of several French possessions, including Belle-Île and Guadeloupe. In 1761, Spain entered the war as an ally of France, hoping to recapture territories lost to Britain during previous conflicts. However, the attempted Spanish invasion of Portugal was thwarted by British intervention, and Spain suffered several naval defeats at the hands of Britain. By 1762, the belligerents were experiencing war weariness and mounting debts. Spain's naval strength had been significantly diminished, and France faced dire financial constraints. The British, on the other hand, maintained their maritime supremacy and continued their campaign on multiple fronts. In the final stages of the European theatre, the British launched a successful offensive against Cuba and the Philippines. Havana fell to the British in 1762, leading to the capture of the entire island of Cuba. Similarly, the British captured Manila, securing control over the Philippines. A statistical summary of the European theatre is as follows. On the British side, approximately 72,000 were killed and 123,000 wounded. French casualties, approximately 75,000 killed and 120,000 wounded. Prussian casualties, approximately 30,000 killed and 60,000 wounded. Spanish casualties, approximately 4,000 killed and 8,000 wounded. Russian casualties, approximately 23,000 killed and 36,000 wounded. Chapter 3. The North American Theatre. The North American theatre of the 7 Years' War is often referred to the French and Indian War in this context. It witnessed a series of conflicts between the 17th of May 1756 and the 15th of February 1763. The main belligerents were Britain and France, with their respective colonial regimes in Canada and America playing crucial roles. Native American tribes also played a significant part in the war, as they formed alliances with European powers, and as previously mentioned, had their own interests in protecting their territories and autonomy. The war in North America began with a series of clashes between British and French forces over territorial disputes and the control of key strategic locations. As early as 1754, the conflict escalated into the French and Indian War as British and French troops clashed in the Ohio River Valley. The British colonial forces, led by George Washington, suffered defeats at Fort Necessity, leading to a further escalation. In 1755, the British government sent General Edward Braddock to North America to lead military operations against the French. However, Braddock's poorly executed campaign resulted in a devastating defeat at the Battle of Monongahela, where he was killed. This setback highlighted the need for British forces to adapt to unique terrain and tactics employed by both French regulars and their Native American allies. In 1756, the war merged into the larger global conflict, the 7 Years' War, with Britain and France formally declaring hostilities in Europe. The North American theatre witnessed a series of offensives and counter-offensives, with both sides seeking to gain the upper hand. The British launched an ambitious plan in 1758 to capture the important French stronghold of Louisbourg. After a grueling siege, the British emerged victorious, gaining control of the fortress and securing a foothold in Canada. The year 1759 proved to be a turning point in the North American theatre. British forces, under the command of General James Wolfe, embarked on a daring amphibious assault to capture Quebec, the capital of New France. The pivotal Battle of the Plains of Abraham saw both Wolfe and French General Montcalm losing their lives, yet the British achieved a decisive victory. This victory led to the eventual fall of Quebec and French Canada. In 1760, British forces captured Montreal, effectively eliminating French military presence in Canada. However, pockets of resistance persisted, and it wasn't until 1763 that the Treaty of Paris officially ended the war, confirming Britain's control over Canada and most of French territories in North America. Throughout the North American theatre, the role of colonial regimes was instrumental. The British colonial forces, despite initial setbacks, learned to adapt to the harsh North American wilderness and employ new tactics to combat the French and their Native American allies. The French in Canada, though initially successful in repelling British advances, struggled to maintain their military presence in the face of continuous British offensives. The Native American tribes played a complex role in the war. Many tribes formed alliances with the French, who had historically maintained more favourable relations with indigenous peoples. These Native American allies provided valuable support to the French, employing guerrilla warfare tactics and conducting raids on British settlements. On the other hand, some tribes, such as the Iroquois Confederacy, sided with the British in hopes of securing better trade opportunities and protection from French and other Native American adversaries. A statistical summary of the North American theatre is as follows. British casualties, approximately 3,000 killed and 7,000 wounded. French casualties, approximately 2,000 killed and 5,000 wounded. However, it is important to note that the war in North America had significant implications for the colonial powers and the indigenous populations, setting the stage for the transformation of the North American continent in the years to come. Chapter 4. The Asian Theatre. The Asian theatre of the 7 Years' War witnessed a series of military engagements and shifting alliances between 1756 and 1763. The main belligerents were, as to be expected, Britain and France, with the conflict primarily centred in India. The colonial regimes in India, such as the British East India Company and the French East India Company, played crucial roles, along with the Indian empires of Hyderabad and the declining Mughal Empire. The war in India was part of the larger global conflict, the 7 Years' War. The Indian conflict began in 1756, when Siraj-ud-Dowlah the Nawab of Bengal, attacked and captured the British settlement of Calcutta. The conflict in India became known as the Third Carnatic War, with the British and French forces vying for control over the lucrative trade and territorial possessions in the region. The French supported the Nawab of Hyderabad and other local rulers against the British. The British East India Company, led by Robert Clive, skillfully utilised alliances with Indian allies, such as the Nizam of Hyderabad and the Mughal Emperor Shah Alam II, to gain advantages over the French. In 1757, the Battle of Plassey proved to be a pivotal moment in the Asian theatre. The British, aided by Mir Jafar, a former ally of Siraj al-Dawla, defeated the Nawab's forces. This victory secured British control over Bengal and significantly weakened the French position in India. In the following years, the British and French continued to clash in the Indian subcontinent. The Battle of Wandiwash in 1760 saw the British decisively defeating the French, leading to the capture of several French-held territories. The French East India Company's influence in India waned, and by 1761, their last stronghold at Pondicherry fell to the British, marking the end of the French presence in the region. During this period, the Indian empires of Hyderabad and the Mughal Empire faced significant challenges due to the European powers' interventions. The Nizam of Hyderabad, once a French ally, eventually switched sides and formed an alliance with the British, seeking to protect his territory from further French aggression. The Mughal Emperor, Shah Alam II, was also caught in the crossfire between the British and the French, with both sides vying for his favour and control over his empire's resources. The Battle of Buxar in 1764 further solidified British dominance in India. The British East India Company, led at this point by Hector Monro, defeated a combined force of Indian allies, including troops from Bengal, Oudh, and the Mughal Empire. The victory secured British control over much of northern India, and further weakened the influence of Indian rulers in the face of British colonial ambitions. A short statistical summary of the Asian theatre is as follows. British casualties, approximately 4,000 killed and 5,000 wounded. French casualties, approximately 4,000 killed and 6,000 wounded. It is again important to remember that the war in the Asian theatre significantly reshaped the power dynamics in India, leading to British colonial dominance and the significant decline of French influence in the region. It also highlighted the complexities of alliances and the shifting roles of Indian empires in the face of European intervention. Chapter 5: Global Consequences and the Treaty of Paris. The end of the 7 Years' War brought significant consequences and reshaped the geopolitical landscape in Europe and beyond. The war officially concluded with a series of peace treaties, the most notable being the Treaty of Paris in 1763. The Treaty of Paris marked the conclusion of the conflict between Britain, France and Spain, and had far-reaching impacts on the balance of power, colonial possessions and future conflicts. The Treaty of Paris, signed on February 10, 1763, resulted in several territorial changes. Britain emerged as the clear victor, gaining significant territorial gains at the expense of France and Spain. France ceded Canada and most of its territories east of the Mississippi River to Britain, while Spain ceded Florida to Britain. In return, France retained a few islands in the West Indies and the strategically important port of New Orleans. The impact of the treaty was felt beyond territorial rearrangements. The war had been immensely costly for all belligerents, and a financial burden was a major consideration in the peace negotiations. Britain's national debt had soared, leading to economic challenges in the post-war period. To alleviate some of these burdens, Britain sought to reduce military spending and raise revenues through increased taxation in the American colonies. The British government's attempts to raise revenue and tighten control over the American colonies, such as the passage of the Stamp Act in 1765, sparked significant unrest and resistance. This unrest ultimately culminated in the American War of Independence, as the colonists sought greater autonomy and representation in their governance. The Treaty of Paris also had significant implications for Native American tribes in North America. The territorial concessions made by France effectively transferred Native American lands to British control without their consent. This further strained relations between Native American communities and the expanding British colonies, leading to increased tensions and conflicts in the years to come. The war's impact extended beyond the North American continent. In Europe, the Treaty of Paris solidified Britain's position as the dominant global power. The war had weakened France, and Britain's territorial gains reinforced its influence on the global stage. Spain, who had retained some of its colonial possessions, experienced a decline in power and influence as well. The Treaty of Paris set the stage for future conflicts and the realignment of alliances. The tension between Britain and its American colonies continued to escalate, ultimately leading to the American Revolutionary War in 1775. In Europe, the treaty's aftermath contributed to further anonymities and power struggles, setting the stage for the outbreak of the Napoleonic Wars in the following decades. The end of the 7 Years' War marked a turning point in global politics. Britain's rise as a dominant colonial power and a subsequent American War of Independence challenged traditional power structures and laid the foundation for the United States' emergence as a new nation. The war's far-reaching consequences underscored the complex and interconnected nature of international relations during this pivotal period in world history. It seems evident, then, that the 7 Years' War has as much right to claim to be the First World War as the wars we consider today to be the world wars. Its vast scope, encompassing many continents, nations, and millions of people, is proven by its vast amount of devastation. But not only did the war devastate, it also changed the course of world history. Most importantly, by setting the stage for the American Revolution by effectively bankrupting Great Britain and breeding discontent in the 13 colonies by raising taxes as a result of the new financial burden. I personally found research for today's video incredibly interesting, and I hope the same can be said for you. If you would like more videos exploring history pre-20th century, then please let us know in the comments below. If you enjoyed today's video, then please remember to like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell so you never miss a new video. But most importantly, I hope you all have a great day.